Capitol Police Board. I'd like to start by thanking Ranking Member Fisher in the Senate and Chairman Stile. We are planned this hearing together. I even wore my red suit to show how bipartisan this hearing is going to be, as well as Ranking Member Morelli, who I've been glad to work with all of the members to plan this really important hearing to discuss the security of our nation's capital. I'd like to thank our colleagues for being here, as well as our witnesses, the members of the Capitol Police Board, who we will introduce shortly: Senate Sergeant at Arms Karen Gibson, Acting House Sergeant at Arms William McFarland, Acting Architect of the Capitol Cherie Rexroth, and Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger. I'd also like to acknowledge that this week marks 25 years since the shooting of Capitol Police Officer Jacob Chestnut and Detective John Gibson, who were killed while bravely defending the Capitol on July 24th, 1998. It is a sobering reminder of the importance of the work of the Capitol Police and that they stand with us. The Capitol Police Board is tasked with the critical work of overseeing and supporting the Capitol Police and coordinate the security efforts of your agencies to protect the Capitol and all those who work and visit here. This hearing is an opportunity to discuss the progress that has been made in recent years and the work that lies ahead. The members of the board have strived to make needed improvements in the past few years since we had a major bipartisan. I know the House also conducted security hearings, but in the Senate with Senator Blunt and I at the time, as well as Senator Portman and Senator Peters, conducted a review of Capitol security. Similar work again at the House, and out of that came a number of suggestions the legislation that provided for this hearing, which I understand is the first joint hearing, is this right, Chairman? Since like 1945 or something, came out of that report as one of the recommendations. Significant progress has been made to implement our 10 recommendations for the entities charged with protecting the Capitol. The majority have been put into effect. We've worked very well between the House and the Senate as well. Critically, the board has worked closely with the department to improve the handling of intelligence, prioritize operational planning, and ensure officers have training and equipment. We remain focused on how we can best support our officers who continue to stand every day. They don't just greet us, they protect us. In the past few years, these men and women have worked significant overtime and had vacations canceled while work has been ongoing to get the department back to full strength. We owe it to our officers and the work that they have done. I'd like to recognize the head of the Capitol Police Union, who's also with us back there. He's so shy and retiring. In the second row, Gus Papathanacio. I just like calling him Gus, who is here today and who has been a consistent and strong advocate on behalf of the rank and file members of the department. And I would note that Chief Manger, as the chief of this department, has hired 280 officers last year and is staying on track to keep with his hiring goals this year, which we truly appreciate. General Gibson, I want to acknowledge the efforts you led to improve how the board functions. I also want to note the work that we are doing together, the chairman and I, and Senator Fisher and Congressman Morelli, on making sure that we have accountability for the architect of the Capitol. And we're excited that the bill actually to give Congress the power to make a decision on changes and termination of the architect of the Capitol is in the defense authorization bill. We got our amendment, Senator Fisher's and my amendment, included in the bill unanimously. That happens all the time. No, I'm kidding. While progress has been made, we must remain clear-eyed about challenges. Top priority, threats against members of Congress. This has happened on both sides of the aisle where members have had threats. Top priority is making sure our resources are used smartly to protect people in the Capitol and when they're in their home districts. Top priority has been retaining and adding police officers for the chief and to bringing back accountability and transparency of the board, including making it easier for the board and for the police chief to call in help when necessary. Those were bills that we have just passed. So I know not everything's rosy, but I think it's very important at this moment in time to acknowledge the work that we have done together and the trust we have built. That trust can be taken away, we know, but we have clearly done more to build morale with the troops. Thank you, Chief. And we're so proud of seeing them every single day, and that there just feels a bit more of a positive feeling around this Capitol, and a lot has to do when you are able to find common ground. With that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your work, Chair Klobuchar, to pull us together for this joint hearing. Thank the ranking member, Senator Fisher, and members of the Senate Rules Chamber, or Senate Rules Committee for hosting today's joint hearing. In the upper chambers, I think of it as the smaller chamber, but nonetheless, we thank our ranking member Morelli and all the members of the House Rules or the House Administration Committee for joining as well. Today's hearing is historic in several ways. It's the first time in modern history that the full Capitol Police Board will testify before both authorizing committees. It's also the first time the board will testify before both of those committees in a joint session. And I'd like to start by recognizing, as Chair Klobuchar said, by recognizing officers Jacob Chestnut and Detective John Gibson, who lost their lives 25 years ago while defending our Capitol. As we remember their sacrifice, I'd like to thank all members in the department who work every day to keep members, staff, and visitors and their fellow officers safe. We must continue to work to support our officers and ensure they have access to important resources, like those provided through the Howard Liebengood Center for Wellness, which was recently established within the United States Capitol Police. Supporting our officers also means bringing transparency and accountability to the United States Capitol Police Board. The voting membership of the United States Capitol Police Board hasn't changed since 1873. Now, members of the board, all of you, are new to your positions within the last 2 years. This is a unique opportunity, a unique moment in time, where we have an opportunity, I think in particular, to depoliticize Capitol security. I'm concerned that historically speaking, security decisions have been influenced sometimes by politics and political considerations rather than security needs. I can give you a couple examples. The board previously signed off on assembling a fence around the Capitol despite no actionable intelligence. And on the House side, former board members allowed selective enforcement of magnetometers just off the House floor. The House side remained closed for COVID-19 long after the Senate began loosening its restrictions. Let me be clear, security should not be political. As chairman of the Committee on House Administration, I'm committed to depoliticizing Capitol security and establishing greater accountability for the board. New board members have made progress towards increasing transparency and accountability, and I thank you for that. This includes closing the 2017 GAO report recommendations, establishing the quarterly board fora, and providing greater communication with its congressional oversight committees. I'm also encouraged that both the House and the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms proactively addressed some of our concerns regarding accountability and transparency in the written testimonies for today's hearing. Those are steps in the right direction, but there's still more work to do. As we work to increase transparency and accountability, the U.S. Capitol Police Office of Inspector General is an important tool in the toolkit. Congress has directed the office to make its reports publicly available. Last week, during a subcommittee on oversight hearing, the Office of Inspector General said that the board is stalling the public release of its reports. I'm troubled that the office lacks the independence necessary to conduct thorough and trusted analysis of the department. Overall, more must be done to ensure greater transparency, accountability, and depoliticization of the board. I remain concerned that there's been certain instances in which politics have seeped into the board, impacting its decision-making. We must seize this opportunity to make meaningful reforms to the board. The board should be focused on effective oversight of the U.S. Capitol Police and not the day-to-day management of the department. Ultimately, this is about giving the brave men and women of the U.S. Capitol support. This is ultimately about giving the brave men and women of the U.S. Capitol Police the support they need. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I now turn it over to my colleague in the Senate and friend, Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman Klobuchar and Chairman Stile, for calling this joint oversight hearing of the Capitol Police Board. And thank you, board members, for being with us this afternoon. I am pleased to be part of this historic hearing, and I look forward to more hearings in the future to improve transparency and open communication between the board and Congress. Board members, each one of you holds a pivotal role here at the United States Capitol. General Gibson, as the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, and Mr. McFarland as the Acting House Sergeant-at-Arms, you're responsible for the security of the United States Senate and the House of Representatives. Ms. Rexroth, as the Acting Architect of the Capitol, you are responsible for the physical security and safety and infrastructure on our campus. Chief Manger, as the Chief of Police, you are responsible for the leading of the brave men and women of the United States Capitol Police Department. As members of the Capitol Police Board, you are all charged with working together to secure not only the Capitol campus, but any place where the work of the legislative branch is conducted. This responsibility is instrumental in ensuring that we, as members of Congress, can fulfill our constitutional and legislative responsibilities. It also ensures that our constituents have a safe and open access to their representatives here in Congress. You are a part of a long history, 150 years, of this board overseeing and supporting the Capitol Police in its mission of protecting Congress. Congress is the constitutional and legislative responsibilities of our government, and all Americans who interact with that legislative process must be safe. One of our goals here today is to understand how best to enhance coordination of your respective agencies to support those purposes. Recently, the board has navigated a number of challenges, including ever-changing physical and cybersecurity risks, evolving threat landscapes, and staff shortages. Congress has recognized these challenges and prioritized increased funding for the Capitol Police to aid it in tackling all of those issues. There will always be emerging challenges for the Capitol Police and this board to navigate, and I look forward to hearing today about how the board has put its resources to work and about other ongoing initiatives to improve and enhance the work of the Capitol Police. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Fisher. Representative Morelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Fisher, and all of my colleagues here who have come for this important bicameral hearing. And I want to thank members of the board as well. Of course, Acting Sergeant of Arms Bill McFarland, who I have a chance to work with each and every day. General Gibson, thank you for your leadership. Thank you, Chief Manger, for all the work you're doing, and I concur with members who have spoken to thank you for all of your work, particularly in the last couple of years, and specifically I'd like to thank the Acting Architect of the Capitol, who has a job I think you neither applied for or necessarily wanted, but you went into work one day as the engineer and left as the Acting Architect. So with great responsibilities, those that I'm not sure you ever expected to have, but I want to thank you for your commitment to this institution and to your service. I too, as my colleagues have, want to recognize the 25th anniversary, if you will, of the deaths of Detective Gibson and Officer Chestnut, who were killed in the line of duty. I think it's an important reminder of all the work that you do, that we support, and our family and our thoughts continue to need to be with their families and their loved ones. And that act of heroism is a reminder when we talk about security, we're talking about more than, seems to me, just the windows and the doors and how to protect the place. We're also talking about the nearly 2,000 Capitol Police officers, and I know, Chief, you're thinking about those officers each and every day, as all of you are. And we need to make sure that those who protect us, that we're doing everything we can to make sure their environment that they work in is as safe as possible. So I know today we're going to talk about issues like implementation of security supplemental, staffing issues, the need for transparency and accountability on the part of the board, and our oversight responsibilities. I'd also want to take some time to make sure we're looking to the future. While the security landscape and the threat environment of the Capitol is constantly evolving, this is a particularly transformative moment for both security and law enforcement in general. I think we all recognize that. And I do want to focus a little bit, and my colleague, Chairman Stile, referenced this, the concept of wellness in law enforcement. And I think even the strongest, most physically fit officers cannot function effectively if they're not emotionally healthy, if they're not mentally healthy. And I'm glad to see the wellness program coming online and increasingly seeing it as a standard feature in law enforcement, particularly with officers who are trained, I think, to, outwardly have strength and project strength, and they do. And I think sometimes their willingness to acknowledge the challenges they maybe have mentally, emotionally, is something we need to continue to work on. So I recently had one of the most impactful meetings in my career. I met with Dr. Serena Liebengood, whose husband, Officer Howie Liebengood, died after the vicious attack by rioters after January 6th. And as Chairman Stile mentioned, he's the namesake of the Wellness Center in Congress. But I'm eager to learn more about the department's wellness programming, the board's role, and whether we're meeting the needs of the brave men and women of the Capitol Police. Along similar lines, I was pleased to see Capitol Police terminate the contract with what I think was an unqualified, unlicensed department psychologist. I appreciate the leadership in terminating that contract. I expect the incoming contractor to be appropriately credentialed and to refer officers in need of specialized care to the proper professionals to address those concerns. Also would like, and I know we're limited in time, but interested in how recent advances and increased commercial investment in artificial intelligence will impact security operations of the legislative branch. And I recently sent letters to the chief, the architect, and the House officers seeking more information on how they've planned to incorporate AI into their operations and how they intend to protect Congress from AI-related threats. I want to make sure Congress, in general, and the Capitol security apparatus more specifically, is prepared for both the opportunities and the threats posed by AI, and I look forward to working on a bipartisan issue with my colleagues on this exciting but at times precarious issue. So, and finally, no discussion of the future would be complete without addressing the fundamental mission of the Capitol Police, as threats not just to members but to staff, to families, visitors remain historically high. And it's important that we focus on our role as a protective agency as opposed to a more traditional. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be in front of you. I want to thank all of you for your incredible service and look forward to the conversation. With that, I yield back.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ranking Member Morelli. Chairman Stile and I are going to introduce the witnesses here, and our first witness is Karen Gibson, Senate Sergeant at Arms and Chair of the Capitol Police Board. General Gibson became the Senate Sergeant at Arms on March 22nd, 2021, after a 33-year Army career, retiring at the rank of Lieutenant General. This is what she did in her retirement. During her military career, General Gibson served in senior intelligence and cybersecurity positions, including Director of Intelligence for United States Central Command. She led intelligence operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Korea, East Africa, and in the United States. She received her bachelor's from Purdue University and 2 master's degrees from the National War College and the National Intelligence University.
Our second witness is Mr. McFarland, who began his career on Capitol Hill in 1991 as a security aide for the U.S. Capitol Police. He's since served in several capacities, spending over a decade as the Director of Security at the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and as Director of the Office of House Security, where he remained until 2021. After a brief stint in the private sector, Mr. McFarland was sworn in as the Acting Sergeant at Arms to the U.S. House of Representatives on January 7th, 2023. Mr. McFarland, we appreciate being here today and look forward to your testimony.
Very good. The third witness, as described by Mr. Morelli, who woke up one day and became the architect of the Capitol, is acting architect of the Capitol, Cherie Rexroth. And I also did want to thank Chairman Stile and the work of your House Committee. The Senate, Senator Fisher and I were engaged in this as well before that hearing, but I really appreciated the work because I think it was time for a change there in a big way. And again, this was a bipartisan effort. Ms. Rexroth became acting architect in February and has been with the agency since 2018, most recently serving as chief engineer, where she was responsible for overseeing architectural and engineering design, historic preservation, and project management. Ms. Rexroth joined the agency with over 30 years of design and construction experience with the Department of Defense, Navy, Marine Corps, and Army. She earned her bachelor's from Texas A&M.
Chief Manger, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. Chief Manger was sworn in as Chief of Police for the United States Capitol Police on July 23, 2021. Chief Manger has served over 42 years in the policing profession, including more than 2 decades as Chief of Police for 2 of the largest police agencies in the National Capital Region. I'd also like to acknowledge that Chief Manger came out of retirement to take on the difficult job of rebuilding the department following January 6th. Thank you for being here, Chief.
Very good. If the witnesses could stand now to be sworn in. Do you swear that the testimony you will give before the committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You can be seated, and we're going to proceed to the testimony for 5 minutes each. General Gibson.
Chair Klobuchar, Chair Stile, Ranking Member Fisher, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of the committees. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today as Chair of the Capitol Police Board. This afternoon, my colleagues and I will discuss our progress in safeguarding the Capitol and our plans for the future. Behind us sit dedicated officers and staff of the Capitol Police, the Architect of the Capitol, and the offices of the Senate and House Sergeants at Arms, representing more than 5,000 dedicated public servants who strive daily to ensure the safety, security, and support services required for America's Congress. When I came to this job, the security environment was dramatically different. The Capitol was surrounded by tall fencing and razor wire. Hundreds of National Guardsmen and women patrolled the grounds. Our buildings and even our grounds were off limits to the public. I am proud to report that today, the Capitol is secure, the Capitol is safe, and the Capitol is fully reopened. Over 2 years, I have witnessed the evolution of the Capitol Police Board and the Capitol Police. This nonpartisan group of security professionals is committed to understanding lessons of the past, to making steady improvements, and to pursuing innovations that enhance security. I assumed the chair of the board my very first day on the job in March 2021. At that time, our most critical and urgent task was to select a permanent chief. We sought a transformative leader who understood policing and the dedication and sacrifice required of law enforcement, and who would take decisive action to lead and reform a demoralized department. The board unanimously chose Chief Tom Manger, and I believe we chose well. I can vouch for significant improvements in the department's ability to plan for, coordinate, and execute responses to major events and security incidents. I have witnessed the development of a competent and professional intelligence capacity that informs USCP's daily activities. The department has also improved the way it equips, trains, recruits, and retains personnel. In coming months, I look forward to seeing the chief's vision play out as we continue the department's reform and reorganization. Post-January 6 studies and reports also highlighted shortcomings in the board. As chair in 2021 and again in 23, it has been my priority to make the board more responsive, more transparent, and accountable. We have significantly reformed the way the board operates. We revised our manual of procedures and abide by it in our daily operation. We follow industry best practices and procedures in our actions and in our frequent communication with stakeholders. I am pleased that the Government Accountability Office recognizes our significant progress in implementing leading practices, having closed a long-standing open recommendation about board operations. We are working to close recommendations from 3 more recent reports and are committed to responding to such observations swiftly. We have also made great strides in transparency. For the first time, the board holds bicameral security forums at least twice a year with congressional leadership and leaders of our oversight committees. And for the first time in at least 6 years, the board is clearing Inspector General reports for public release. Since May, we've formally released 4 reports, and 2 others are under review with more to follow. I have heard varied opinions on the Capitol Police Board's structure. The informed security decisions we make must be considered in an objective and responsive forum. The current board configuration provides such an environment, and I believe our composition is the appropriate structure for advancing the security needs of the legislative branch in an agile, objective, nonpartisan, and bicameral manner. It's been 28 months since I joined the Capitol Police Board when I was sworn in as the 42nd Sergeant at Arms and doorkeeper of the U.S. Senate. I am humbled by the tremendous mission I'm entrusted with and by the dedicated public servants who help me execute my responsibilities. I am very proud of the progress we've made to improve security at the Capitol. I take heart in our successes. I acknowledge the need for additional improvement, and I remain absolutely committed to enhancing the security of the Capitol and the safety of members, staff, and the millions of visitors who walk our halls. I must always thank the brave men and women of the Capitol Police dedicated to keeping us safe, as well as the hardworking employees of our respective staffs. Thank you for your continued trust and support, and for the honor of serving our great nation in this capacity. I thank you again for the opportunity to appear and look forward to your questions.
Yeah, I think, yes, Mr. McFarland.
Chairman Style, Ranking Member Morelli, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Fisher, and distinguished members of the Committee on the House Administration and Senate Rules and Administration. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today at the first joint hearing on the Capitol Police Board. My testimony focuses on my objectives for the Capitol Police Board: oversight and accountability, innovation, and transparency. Not coincidentally, these values align with the objectives and strategic plan I've established for my own team at the House Sergeant at Arms. I believe that when the Capitol Police embodies these values, it functions at its best. Since starting as the House Sergeant at Arms in January, my first goal has been to increase oversight and accountability on the U.S. Capitol Police Board and working with my counterparts to reform the way we operate. At its core, the Capitol Police Board serves as an oversight body to the U.S. Capitol Police. The board focuses on strategic decisions and makes sure the U.S. Capitol Police identifies and takes appropriate operational measures to implement those decisions. Accordingly, the chief serves as that operational head of the U.S. Capitol Police Force. In accordance with this approach, the board is currently working on the chief's yearly review and establishing the goals for the upcoming year. In my role on the board, I will hold him accountable for filling those goals and will support his team however I can. The board has also reformed the way it works with the U.S. Capitol Police Inspector General to increase oversight and accountability of the department. We've closely partnered with the U.S. Capitol Police IG to close IG recommendations, with a particular emphasis on those that were included in the flash reports after January 6th. In the spirit of transparency and as part of my office leadership in the U.S. Capitol Police IG Working Group, the Capitol Police Board has approved the public release, with appropriate redactions, of IG reports concerning the Capitol Police. We are actively working those additional reports. It is always hard to strike the balance between publicly releasing information and maintaining security. But consistent with the instructions received from the Legislative Branch Appropriations Subcommittee, 4 IG reports have been released over the past months, and a number others are pending. The public release of 4 reports this year is a new approach for the board. As we iron out the processes associated with public release, I'm confident we can increase the speed in which these reports are released. While I'm optimistic about the progress we made closing U.S. Capitol Police IG recommendations and publicly posting reports, following last week's hearing, it's clear that we have more work to do in maintaining transparency and clear communication with our committees of oversight. I'm committed to further improvements in both areas and holding the U.S. Capitol Police IG responsible for doing the same. We're focused on reviewing the remaining FY23 IG reports first, and leaning forward, we have asked the IG for a list of all reports issued prior to FY23 so the working group can expand the amount of reports we're releasing. Continue to the theme of reforming the way the board operates, I am also pleased to report that the GAO recommendation concerning the board adopting corporate best practices about accountability, transparency, and communication was closed earlier this year. There is still work to be done to improve the way we operate as an oversight board. One area of focus going forward is the timely closure of GAO recommendations that were issued after the January 6th review. I'm holding myself and my partners on the board accountable for timely completion of these recommendations. Significant improvement is needed in the timely completion of security projects around the campus. While the inception of many of these projects predate my time on the board, it is an accountability focus of mine to ensure that the Capitol, our beacon of democracy, and the capital of the free world receives much needed enhancements for which Congress has provided generous support. I look forward to working closely with my counterparts on the board and the Committee of Jurisdiction on my side as we continue to reform the way we operate. During my tenure on the board, I have also focused on fostering the spirit of innovation within the Capitol Police and the Capitol Police Board. One important accomplishment on this front is the recent reorganization proposal of the U.S. Capitol Police. I understand and value the input the committees have in the process and appreciate your support in moving this forward. Prospectively, I believe a significant innovation reform will be use of manpower. The Capitol Police have a significant number of officers spread across a wide range of missions. I think there are improvements that can be made to ensure that officers are used for their best and highest use, and I look forward to challenging the chief and the department to evaluate this area. For example, filling the civilian vacancies within the department to reach the allocated civilian staffing levels can help. Doing so can help up free sworn personnel to perform duties that only sworn officers can perform. This in turn can allow officers to take much needed time off and allow greater access to take vital training. I would also like to see the department move forward with promotions to fill out many of the acting positions officials are serving today while instilling an accountable leadership culture. I also firmly believe that U.S. Capitol Police Board and the Capitol Police must continue to focus on operating transparently with our stakeholders. The Capitol Police Board and the Capitol Police must be transparent with stakeholders about the processes and inputs that go into decision-making. We must feel comfortable in the appropriate form, explaining why we made the decisions we did. The Capitol Police Board will not always agree, but constructive dialogue around opposing views can lead into new discoveries and improve the way that we operate. In closing, my tenure as the Sergeant at Arms and my actions on the Capitol Police Board have focused on three goals: oversight and accountability, innovation, and transparency. These goals have guided my past actions and will continue to help guide my service on the board in the future and in continue to reform the way we operate. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify before you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rexroth.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Klobuchar, Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Fisher, and Ranking Member Morelli, and distinguished members of the committees. And thank you again for the opportunity to discuss the work of the Capitol Police Board. As a member of the board, the AOC remains dedicated to our partnership with the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms and the U.S. Capitol Police to ensure that we meet the needs of the congressional community. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of how truly grateful I am for the AOC hardworking staff, mission-focused employees who come every day to make sure that the functions of Congress, the Supreme Court, and the Library of Congress are met. Over the past 5 years, I have met with the committees, stakeholders, and board members to gain an understanding of their concerns, issues, and priorities. As highlighted in the FY24 budget hearings, my focus remains safety, security, and accountability. The AOC continues to make strides in effectively addressing these priorities, but understandably, there's more work to do. In coordination with the board and the Capitol Police, the AOC repaired the facility damage from January 6, 2021, and implemented various physical security measures to increase the security of the Capitol complex. We completed the planning and programming required to fully execute the FY23 security supplemental, and those construction projects are scheduled to begin this fall. The other related physical security projects are in various stages of acquisition and execution. We will continue coordinating with the board to ensure these projects include the latest technical requirements. As discussed with your staff, some of these projects and improvements are visible while others are not. So we stand ready to provide a status briefing on any specific project in a secure environment. To help address the speed of project execution and expedite the acquisition process, we are hiring 2 contracting officers that will be assigned to the Office of the Chief Security Officer. Another initiative to help facilitate the overall program will be the establishment of a temporary program management office to assist with project administration and execution. Similarly, to improve transparency of the planning and implementation process, the AOC will resume the monthly action officer meetings with representatives of all board agencies. We will restart the formal project coordination process within the board to ensure the planned projects fully address their requirements and concerns. We will also continue our monthly meetings so that we can standardize notification and quarterly status updates. In addition to balancing the physical and safety requirements, the AOC actively participates in the Emergency Management Task Force, developed drills and exercises. Likewise, we have increased the number of office emergency coordinators and continue to develop comprehensive emergency training and the programs available to all staff. On behalf of our dedicated servants who carry out our mission every day, I want to thank you for your time and your support and your acknowledgement of what the AOC and our role on the board.
Thank you very, very much. Last up, Chief Major.
Chairwoman Klobuchar, Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Fisher, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide both committees with an overview of the comprehensive security improvements we have implemented to keep our campus safe. When I was sworn in 2 years ago, the department was in the midst of dealing with multiple Inspector General and committee after-action reports detailing the failures and improvements needed related to January 6th. However, far and away the most serious issue was staffing. The USCP was not only woefully understaffed to meet its mission, but it was also losing more employees than it was able to hire. To date, the department, with the support of Congress, has been successful in getting ahead of attrition, bringing on 549 officers since March of 2020. The current number of sworn employees on the department is 2,010, which includes recruits at the USCP Academy and FLETC. While still below the department's authorized level of 2,126 sworn officers, it has allowed us to reopen the campus and provide critical training for our officers. These staffing enhancements have allowed us to make substantial improvements to the department. It has enabled the USCP to stand up an intelligence bureau capable of collecting, analyzing, sharing, operationalizing, and disseminating intelligence. The department has implemented additional wellness programs and services, including the onboarding of trauma-informed employee assistance counselors and wellness specialists. We distributed new civil disturbance equipment to our sworn officers and ensured that the officers have received updated CDU training. We obtained funding for our Dignitary Protection Division to travel and protect members of Congress here and around the country. With a 300% increase in threat cases against members of Congress, we have updated department technology to enhance investigative capabilities. We've also re-engineered our training capabilities, and we've adopted industry best practices with the use of virtual scenario training to include active shooter training in the very buildings we need to protect. We have been tasked in the last 2 years to close out over 150 Inspector General and after-action report recommendations. At the same time, we're developing and implementing a transformational change within the department. All the while, we must maintain the staffing and resources needed to carry out the department's daily core mission. While the big picture reforms are significant and important, staffing daily mission requirements are also vital. We engage in a no-fail mission every day. It's my responsibility as chief to pay attention to all of the department's needs. At this time, I cannot overstate how great our resource needs are for the Protective Services Bureau. The sheer increase in the number of threats against members of Congress requires new and innovative techniques to identify, deter, and mitigate threats before they materialize. Over the last year, a member of Congress was brutally assaulted. Another member was attacked on the campaign trail. The husband of a former House Speaker was critically wounded in an attack. And a member's district staff was attacked by a baseball bat-wielding intruder. These events demonstrate how the Capitol Police need to increase our focus on protecting members, their families, and staff throughout the country, not merely in Washington, D.C. One of the department's greatest challenges right now is the retention of our dignitary protection agents and investigative division agents. Prior to January 6, DPD was staffed with 218 agents. Currently, DPD has 174 fully trained agents. This staffing level is unsustainable for DPD. Agents are averaging nearly 50 hours of overtime per pay period. We are again on pace this year to receive approximately 8,000 threat assessment cases. Threat assessment agents carry an average annual caseload of nearly 500 cases. This pace cannot be maintained, and we must have the ability to continue our hiring efforts in this critical area. The department, with the board's assistance, are working to remedy this situation. Many of the strategies to address these challenges were included in our FY23 and 24 budget. These strategies include additional positions, an 1811 law enforcement series status, and LEAP pay, both of which would positively impact our recruitment efforts and slow attrition in our Protection Services Bureau. To address our staffing issues in the short term, we continue to work with our state and local law enforcement agencies in the members' home districts for protective detail support through the MOU process. I'm pleased to report today on the great progress that we've made, and while there are still improvements that are underway, I assure the committees that the brave men and women of the United States Capitol Police stand ready to protect and defend this campus without fail.
Thank you very much, Chief. We have a number of members here from the House and Senate, so I will stay within my 5 minutes. So we ask that your answers be brief. I know that's hard for senators, but we will. Acting Architect Rexroth, we're at the height of the tourist season. There are people everywhere. It is really actually quite wonderful to see. We have had more than 1 million visitors so far this year at the Capitol Visitor Center. Have staff and volunteers at the Visitor Center kept pace with the increased volume of visitors?
Thank you for the question. Yes, ma'am. My understanding is that they have.
Okay, very good. Thank you. General Gibson, quick question. The board established a process last year for reviewing and making public Capitol Police Inspector General reports public, and 4 were released this year. It's important for increasing transparency at the department, while at the same time we know you have to protect sensitive security information. Are you committed to making additional Inspector General reports public? What's the expected timeline?
Absolutely. Senator, thank you for that question. I am absolutely committed to making those reports public once they've been through a security review. It is an effort we began with this Congress. Our first step was to establish the process and an understanding across all the entities who played a role on how we would proceed, and then we began. So I realize we have not released them publicly at the rate that is desired, and I think Mr. McFarland did a great job of outlining our approach collectively to accelerate that in the future.
Thank you. Chief Major, you talked about restoring morale at the department, hiring new officers, how important that is, while working to retain those already in the ranks. To build up the department and stay ahead of attrition has been a top priority for you. Talk about how the funding has helped. Both houses have worked on funding, and then talk about how you're using this funding in terms of what you talked about, the threat assessment, the members and safety at home and the like, and what more resources you need.
The funding has helped in a number of ways. One, it's made us more competitive in terms of being able to attract applicants to the department. It has assisted us in strategies to retain officers so that our attrition rate has gone down. Most of the increases in my budget requests are directly tied to staffing. And in the beginning, we needed to get USB up to staff so we could reopen the campus and staff all the posts that need to be staffed around the campus. Now the focus is on our Protective Services Bureau and there's a number of strategies that you'll see in the coming months and in the next year that will assist us in getting lateral transfers over to our DPD section and investigative agents, as well as allowing our officers some officers, when they get hired, to go directly to DPD. They wouldn't have to do time in USB if they will put them through the training and they'll go directly to DPD. All of that is meant to increase the numbers in DPD as quickly as we can.
Can you speak to the role of the department's field offices and the 3 special assistant U.S. attorneys, that's San Francisco, Tampa, and Washington, and their help in other areas, I believe, in coordinating responses to member threats? What's the status of the department's effort to open additional efforts?
So they've really only been in effect for about a year or so, so we're still evaluating their effectiveness. But I can tell you anecdotally that they have been a big help in terms of being able to deploy from their locations much more quickly and efficiently than it would be for us to send folks out from D.C. For a number of threat cases. They are subject matter experts for all of our investigators as we're investigating those threats and looking toward the possibility of prosecution. They are the subject matter experts that assist us. Right now, our hope is to open up 3 additional field offices over the next year or so, Milwaukee, Boston, and somewhere in Texas. So, and
It's a big state, so, but.
it
Okay,
is,
good.
but we'll find a place.
All right, excellent. Chief, one last question. You talked about the proposed reorganization, and Mr. McFarland also mentioned it to help the department to carry out its mission. Could you talk about, have you gotten input and communicated with rank and file officers during the process? That's obviously important to us, to Gus, that rhymed, and to all those involved.
Almost any decision I make is informed by my discussions with the rank and file and with the FOP. As I try not to ever pass an officer without stopping and talking to them for a few minutes, and you get a real idea of what their issues are, what their needs are, and that's how I quickly understood that the biggest issue that we face was staffing, for the reasons that you discussed earlier about holding people over and canceling days off, that we needed to get to a staffing level where that is not happening every day too frequently.
Very good, thank you. Chairman Stow.
Thank you very much. I started with my opening remarks talking about one of my priorities is really to depoliticize Capitol security. And Mr. McFarland, I know you share this goal with me, and I want to thank you for your leadership in bringing greater transparency and accountability to the board. As you know, the U.S. Capitol Police Officer of Inspector General is required to make the reports public. You referenced that in your opening remark. As we noted, only 2 reports are made public prior to this hearing or in the near future. You obviously increased that and doubled it in the lead up to this hearing. Appreciate you making progress. Question for you, it was referenced you're building out a policy. Is there a written policy regarding the process for approving the public release of Inspector General reports, or is that an informal process that the board has?
Sir, the way it refers that I think that the IG process works is the U.S. Capitol Police IG, after it reviews everything, it proposes redactions. It's sent then to the Capitol Police Office of the General Counsel, where they also take a look at it. They propose redactions. It's then sent to the Inspector General working group that we currently chair. And then this is where we either propose our own redactions or we ask for concurrence. It then goes to the Capitol Police Board. We vote on it, and then once we vote on it, then it gets published.
And so in that voting, do you feel that the board then has the final say on making those publicly available?
That the board does, yes.
The board holds that, has the authority. Thank you, and I appreciate the work you're doing on that. Ms. Gibson, thanks for being here at the hearing as well. I think you'd agree that both the Senate Rules Committee and independently the Committee on House Administration have oversight jurisdiction over the United States Capitol Police Board, right?
Of course.
And you're currently the chair of the U.S. Capitol Police Board. For the most part, in the role of the chair of the board, is that mostly administrative, or is there any other practices that would be unique to the chair as all board members are voting equally, correct?
All board members are voting equally. All board members have say and participate in deliberations. The role of the chair is largely administrative. It is, hosting the meetings typically held in our spaces. It is assisting with administrative requirements and setting the agenda. I have never known any time when a board member has been denied the opportunity to introduce an item to our agenda.
Perfect. And do you agree that the Committee on House Administration has oversight jurisdiction over the chairperson of the board as it relates to the role of the board?
That's an interesting question, Chairman. I honestly never contemplated that as an oversight role separate from my role as an officer of the Senate.
I would go back in, you sent me a letter in your capacity as chair of the Capitol Police Board objecting to actions taken by the Committee on House Administration. And so I think this is a dialogue that we should have a little bit, but in the role as chair of the Capitol Police Board, I think the Committee on House Administration does have oversight. I understand we don't if it's in your role as Senate Sergeant at Arms. And so I'd like to insert to the record that the letter that you wrote dated June 6, 2023, signed by you as chair of the Capitol Police Board, making those comments. Let me move on, though. In your opening remarks, you noted that the Capitol is secure. You were also a member of former Speaker Pelosi's post-January 6 Honoré Task Force, which raised multiple security concerns in the report regarding the Capitol complex and provided pretty significant recommendations. Of those recommendations that you were a part of, have those all been completed?
The vast majority of them have been, I believe. We certainly get back to you on that. I know that the one on introducing horses into the department is not. It is not a recommendation that the department has chosen to adopt, and there may be a few others like that.
And so inside a sufficient number have been resolved that you feel confident in saying that the Capitol is secure?
Yes.
Okay, let me jump back to you, Mr. McFarland, in the final minute that I have, just to turn our attention to the 2017 Government Accountability Office report, where the GAO did an analysis of the board's operation, and it found that the U.S. Capitol Police Department's tactical decisions were being made by the board or the responsibility of the board. An example of that would be the uniform standards in issuing of gear, a pretty tactical, less strategic decision-making process. I'd like to see the board operating a little bit more strategically than tactically. Can you comment as to the reforms we could make? And I know we're short on time, but maybe very briefly.
Sure, sir. What I suggest is on little things like that, when it talks about the clothing of the Capitol Police, I do think that the chief should make the ultimate decision on that. I don't think it should be a board recommendation.
Thanks. I think there's a broad idea here as to how we get the board to operate strategically, not tactically, so we can focus on oversight, depoliticizing Capitol Police security, and supporting the men and women of Capitol Police. Thank you all for being here. I'll yield back.
Very good. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chairman Stile. Chief Manger, you've proposed to restructure the department to prioritize accountability, internal controls, and employee development. Your proposal creates several new positions, including a third assistant chief of police. There are also several current positions, including your two current assistant chiefs of police that remain occupied by acting personnel. What is your strategy and timeline for filling these open positions with some permanent appointees?
So I've said from the day I got here that I wasn't going to make those promotions at the upper ranks because that would just deplete the lower ranks, and we could not afford to do that. However, we're in a position right now where we've just completed promotional processes, and I'm looking to make the promotions throughout the ranks by the end of the summer.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Many law enforcement agencies are having trouble maintaining appropriate staffing levels. What programs have you implemented to improve recruitment and retention at the department? You've been successful. What impact have they had on those programs?
So, first of all, I have to thank Congress for changing our pay scale, which made us very competitive. The fact that we are able to fund a retention bonus each year, student loan repayment program, a number of other benefits that we're able to offer our officers that other departments do not. As much as I read and hear from my colleagues about difficulty in recruiting people, thankfully, we have not had that problem. We get over 1,000 applications every month.
Remind me what the number is now on officers with the department.
We have 2,010 officers. Now, that includes officers that are in the academy as well.
And what is your goal?
Our authorized strength is currently 2,126. However, I'm hopeful if the FY24 budget passes, it'll bump us up to 2,204.
And on the assistant positions that I mentioned earlier, are you looking at drawing from current officers within the department, or do you anticipate to look outside? I assume you're on that road right now when you said you were hoping to fill those positions with permanent people by the end of summer.
Yes, we're in the process now. We've gotten applications both from inside the department and outside, and all will be considered.
Okay, thank you. Also, Congress has provided specific mutual aid funding for the department to reimburse other law enforcement agencies that assist the department's protection of members at events in their home states. Can you describe that process for conducting outreach to these agencies and how the department ensures collaborative information sharing to support those mission requirements?
So where we know that there are either leadership or members who have threats that we're dealing with, we're proactive in reaching out to local law enforcement. Where we get requests from any member of Congress for law enforcement coordination, if they're doing a town hall meeting or whatever in their home district, we're proactively contacting the state or local agency that can assist and formulating a memorandum of understanding so that we can reimburse them for their assistance in that home district.
Have you found that cooperation, that collaboration to be positive?
Very positive. Now, there are some of our members live in small towns where the departments can't necessarily give us the assistance that we're looking for, but then we look beyond the town to the county or the state, and so but it's all very positive.
When you look to the state, do you have pretty good relationship then with the governor's office, say? Has State Patrol been involved in this?
Yeah, well, we go directly to the head of the law enforcement agency, and yes, the cooperation is always very good.
Okay, and this is for any member of the board to answer as we look at these threats against Congress and members of Congress. They're increasing, not just physical, but online and through technology that we use on a daily basis. So how are your agencies working together to mitigate cybersecurity threats that target the technology infrastructure of the legislative branch? General.
I'll take that one, Senator.
Great,
As I think, as I'm responsible for cybersecurity in the U.S. Senate, as you know, and my House counterpart is the Chief Administrative Officer. We have a very robust and capable cybersecurity team within the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms CIO shop. They work closely. They have access to a number of commercial vendors to provide additional support. We collaborate very closely with the Capitol Police and the House Chief Administrative Officer on cyber threats, as well as the architect has some cybersecurity responsibilities as well. Together, we are working to enhance relationships with external entities like the FBI, DHS, and others who have access to sensitive threat information that does not readily make its way to the legislative branch. And while there's still considerable work to be done, I'm very pleased with the progress that we are beginning to make in that regard.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I now recognize Ranking Member Morelli for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to my colleagues. Thank you all. I want to start, if I can, Chief Major, with asking a little bit about, again, emotional health and wellness. And I also want to acknowledge Gus Papathanos. You know, I don't know, that's probably not, I'm not terribly good with Greek names. I'm a little better with Italian, but Gus, thank you for all your work. And Chief, thank you for your courtesies. Having us over at the Operations Center and meeting with senior staff, I think it's helped me and my staff get a better handle when you're there and you're talking to people and you're able to ask some questions about operations. Certainly helps, at least for me, to take theoretical ideas and they make them much more tangible. But I wanted to go back to some of my opening comments, particularly around the wellness program you offer through the Howie Liebengood Center. Can you just give an overview from your perspective of how that's going and how the program's progressing?
Well, I'm very happy to report, and I think this is the first time I've been asked about this at every hearing, but we have 16 full-time employees in the Wellness Center currently, and we're still building. It's an employee assistance program, it's a peer support program, it's a wellness program. We have trauma-informed counselors, so we can deal with PTSD problems for the officers. We've also provided critical incident stress management training. 114 of our employees have taken advantage of it. We've got 87 more that are signed up to take that training. So we're going to have folks, peer support assistants, all throughout the department. But our wellness program tries to address, we've looked at what's working around the country at wellness programs, and we've tried to get these best practices to make sure that we're addressing all of the needs that our department has. But we're also doing a formal needs assessment where we will hear from everybody in the organization about what they would like to see. So this is informing us as we continue to build this program.
And if you're having interaction with officers and members of the force, what's the feedback been from your perspective? Are there things that they would like to see that you haven't been able to do yet, or is being received well? I mean, you just get a sense for how the members are dealing with it.
It runs the gamut. I mean, you've got some officers that say, you know, I want to get in better shape physically. I want to improve my nutrition. You've got other officers that are dealing with very difficult emotional problems, some at home, some to do with work. So it's just a matter of having all of those services available to folks.
Is there access 24 hours a day? I don't know how it works in terms of, I mean, if a member's having a crisis middle of the night, is it open? Can they access it?
You know, I'm fairly certain there is, because we certainly, when we need someone from the Wellness Center, we can get them 24/7. So that certainly will be part of the way we operate. I don't know if we're there yet, but it certainly is the goal.
So, in terms of recruits, do they receive wellness training when they're at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center? Do you know if that's part of the?
It is. It's just basically an introduction course. We talk about the importance of understanding how the job can impact you, the stress of the job can impact you, what services are available, and how to deal with that stress in a as healthy a manner as one can. So yes, they get familiarized with that in the academy.
Yeah, I'd love to continue to be supportive of that, and if there's other things that we ought to be doing, would love to have that conversation. Just to shift gears, earlier this month, a federal judge in the case Missouri versus Biden issued a pretty wide-ranging preliminary injunction restricting the government's communication with social media companies that bars the executive branch from engaging with platforms on content moderation issues, with a few exceptions. I'm just curious if you've been tracking the case and whether or not, because while it doesn't deal with the legislative branch directly, it does with partners like the FBI and Department of Justice on intelligence gathering. Has this impacted your ability to work threat cases and gather intelligence? Has it had an impact at all?
Not to my knowledge. I will get back to you. I'll talk to my folks, but not to my knowledge.
And then I don't have enough time, but I'm going to follow up offline. Just want to continue to ask questions about artificial intelligence and how you see that potentially as a tool, and also how you see it as potential threats. And I'll probably come back to all of you in that regard. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Representative Morelli. We've been joined by another number of senators, including Senator Ossoff, Senator Britt, Senator Capito. Senator Welch is with us, and I appreciate him allowing Senator Bennett to go before him because Senator Bennett has another time commitment. Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to my colleague from Vermont for letting me jump in line just for a moment. So I really appreciate it. Chief, I apologize. I missed some of the earlier testimony. I wanted to go back to something you said. Your authorized force is going to be 2,200. You think if the
FY24 budget's approved.
and you're up to 2,000 now, so you're 200 or so short at this point. And how big are your academy classes?
They generally run around 24, 25 officers.
And how often do they run?
Nearly every month.
So how long do you think, if you're able to fill those classes, how long do you think it's going to take you to be able to get to that authorized force?
Realistically, we seem to, in the last few years, we've seemed to get about 100 head of attrition each year. So to get 200 would be 2 years. That's my guess.
And what in a long far away place, I was the chief of staff to a mayor of Denver whose name was John Hickenlooper. I don't know whatever happened to that guy, but he, and I can remember in the work that we did there are challenges when you're building a police department. Sometimes poor management before you means you've got a lot of attrition and you can't find the people you need. Sometimes there are too many, you've got a long lag in hiring because of budget things. You are in a very interesting position, I think, in part because people saw both the events of January 6th, but also heard how uncompetitive the pay was at some point, how poorly budgeted this was. Obviously, we've made a lot of progress, but I wonder if you could use this opportunity to tell us what you're telling people who are thinking about whether they ought to try to join the Capitol Police Force. What is your recruiting pitch about why they should come and how they should think about the bad news that maybe, hopefully, is in the rearview mirror?
Well, there are a lot of ways to serve your country, but this is one of the finest ways to serve your country by serving with the Capitol Police. And people truly get a front row seat to history. And this is not, I've worked and grew up in 2 other police departments,
right.
and that were very different from this police department. And there are a lot of folks that this kind of job, the protection part of it, the service to their country, being in this historic campus, it appeals to them. And I think we've been blessed to have no trouble getting people to apply.
And do you think, and you mentioned earlier, I just want to underscore for people who might be listening that the compensation now is competitive in ways that it wasn't before.
Absolutely. An officer, the day they step out of the academy, is making $74,000 a year. That's pretty good.
Do you, Mr. McFarland, I wonder, do you have anything that you'd like to add on the questions about mental health, in particular, the services that we're providing or that you're providing in support of the chief's mission here?
Sure. So at the request of certain members, I've actually reached out to Ms. Liebengood personally to talk to her exactly what she thought the mission should be. I think there was a disconnect in the beginning of what the Wellness Center, what she envisioned and what the Wellness Center kind of envisioned. But I think together, by having these discussions, I think we've gotten it on the right track. And I'm fully supportive of the chief and how it's been working out so far. So
you didn't. I heard the chief's numbers in terms of people that had asked to. Those sounded a little bit lower than I might have expected, given everything that we've been confronting. And I wonder if you have any reaction.
No, I think 16 people right now for starting and out is adequate. I'd like to see the numbers go higher, but I think it's trying to find out a good baseline of where we are right now.
And I just have 30 seconds left. So that's lucky for you, Ms. Gibson, because I was going to come to you with a question, but let me make an observation. When people come from Colorado, I think it's really important for them to feel like these buildings are accessible to them. And there are entrances that have been closed, some of it after January 6th. Some of it, I think, goes back to the sequester, the budget stuff several years ago. The one that drives me craziest is the second floor of the Russell Building, where, you know, that entrance says, it's huge block letters, entrance closed, which for many people is their first view of their building, of the place that they're supposed to be able to have access. And I wonder if there's a plan to think about reopening some of those entrances now that we're in the position that we're in today, and in particular that one.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that feedback. That's something we'll work with the department. You know, we've prioritized the doors that would open based on their growing numbers, and certainly that's one that we can look at where it falls in the broader scheme of continuing to man posts as the department grows larger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Griffith is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Manger, I appreciate your candor and willingness to answer questions earlier this year regarding the separation agreement of former Acting Chief of Police Pittman, which resulted in her retirement with full benefits. I think you're transparent, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for that. I think you're one of the good guys, but I'm kind of like a dog with a bone. So, regarding Ms. Pittman's separation agreement, was the United States Capitol Police's General Counsel Thomas DeBias acting as your personal attorney or the attorney for the United States Capitol Police?
For the Capitol Police.
And are you aware that the United States Capitol Police's General Counsel DeBias, in a transcribed interview, has attempted to invoke attorney-client privilege, yes or no?
Yes.
And if yes, did you instruct him to do so?
No.
Okay. Notwithstanding the fact that attorney-client privilege does not apply, in my opinion, in this case, because this is a legislative branch investigating a legislative branch entity, common law, established practice, and the Congressional Oversight Manual stand for the proposition that there is no attorney-client privilege in such cases. And notwithstanding that this committee or Congress might be the client as opposed to you in your official capacity, if you are in fact the client, would you waive the attorney-client privilege between you and lawyer DeBias? Yes or no?
I trust his judgment on the attorney-client, the use of the attorney-client privilege.
Do you understand that? I don't think it is your privilege, but if it is, it's not his privilege, it's your privilege. The lawyer doesn't have that privilege. You do. If it is in fact your privilege, would you be willing to waive it?
I would take my attorney's advice.
Well, it's a privilege. It belongs to you. It doesn't belong to your attorney.
I understand that.
So if he's giving you advice on that, that would be a conflict of interest for him. Do you understand that? You would need to get separate counsel for that.
I deal with my general counsel all the time on these issues, and I trusted his advice.
All right. I understand you trust his advice, but this is specific between you and he, and therefore he would have a conflict in advising you on this. I suggest you get separate counsel for that. Ms. Gibson, are you familiar with the separation agreement entered into between the United States Capitol Police and former Acting Chief of Police Pittman, yes or no?
I am familiar with that.
But you were not involved in that discussion, as I understand it, from the
That's correct.
The
board,
good chiefs has told us that before.
Right. The board was not aware of that agreement until the testimony before this committee.
Okay. And have you all as a board discussed this separation agreement after the fact? Have you all had discussions regarding this agreement and how it came about?
We have.
And have you had those discussions with Attorney DeBias?
I don't recall Mr. DeBias being part
He
of.
was not privy to those discussions.
No.
Was Chief Manger privy to those discussions?
Yes. I mean, we discussed this at a board meeting following.
And did he discuss with you the attorney's advice that was given to him?
That I do not recall. I actually think it was, our discussion was more, while we see the management of personnel within the department to be within the chief's purview, back to the tactical versus strategic, it was a significant event that we would have appreciated knowing about in advance.
Okay.
And that was really the extent of our.
Same questions to the other two members. Did you all ever have any discussions with Chief Manger about his discussions with the attorney DeBias?
No.
Okay. And so my concern is that policy was changed, and that may or may not have been appropriate. That's another issue which Chief Manger got a legal counsel on. He's a good guy. I'm not fussing at him. My concern is if we've done it for one, Are we going to do it for others? Has such an agreement been approved for any rank and file officers? And I would ask this of you, Ms. Gibson, do you have any knowledge that this was approved for rank and file officers? And I'm not talking about a case where, as the rule says, you can do it when you expect somebody to come back, or you hope they'll come back. Maybe they've got a slight disability or a medical issue and you're hoping they're coming back. In this case, we had an employee who actually had taken another job and left the region, had gone to the West Coast. Do you know of any other cases where that's been done for rank and file members of the United States Capitol Police?
I would say I do not have knowledge of when it's been done, period, because again, it's a personnel management decision that the board has not been involved in for any of the officers.
Have you ever taken those liberties with the Senate under any of the folks under your situation in the Senate?
I do not have a similar program.
Okay. I appreciate that. I see my time is up and I yield back.
Very good. Next up is Senator Welsh, who spent a lot of time with the House in the past and is now back in his capacity as a senator.
Thank you very much. It really is good to be here with my colleagues from the House. And by the way, I don't know who provided all those goodies out back. This is on the down low, all right? But thank you to the House Administration Committee. It is good to be here. And I want to thank Chairwoman Klobuchar and Chairman Stile for this hearing. Number one, I just want to thank all of you for the work you do, especially everybody who's been involved since January 6th. I mean, obviously, incredibly traumatic event. I know folks suffered more than our officers. And it's just astonishing because for a lot of the officers, the experience has not left them. And I also just want to acknowledge that, as is always the case after that happened, there have to be investigations. There are different points of view about what and how it happened, who should have done what. But bottom line, I think you all have done a really good job. And I, just as a person who serves here and benefited from the work that you all have done, I want to express my gratitude to you. So thank you. I do want to just go back, Chief Manger, to some of the questions that Mr. Morelli was asking about mental health. I mean, that's a tough topic. Officers are tough people, and they do their job, and they have no expectation that they'll do anything less than what is required. But on the end of the day, some of the experiences that our officers had were pretty tough. And also, I wonder whether at times when there has been so much political discussion about what happened, who was at fault, what does it mean, that diminishes the reality of what folks on the front line did that day to protect us here. So maybe you can just talk about morale and what we can do to be supportive of the people who protected us and stood up and did their duty.
So certainly January 6th had a devastating impact on morale. And a lot of it was directed toward the officers feeling that the department, the leadership, let them down. Mm-hmm. Things as simple as just having the equipment that they needed, they didn't have. But as time went on, and I guess the political discussion about January 6th did in fact impact my officers as well. They felt like they were doing, the job they were paid to do, acted very bravely and fought courageously that day. And then you had folks, frankly, no offense on both sides of the aisle, who were critical of had their own agendas for, about what happened. And oftentimes it certainly impacted my officers to feel like they were being disrespected or not, that somehow they were at fault for what occurred. And I spent a lot of time ensuring that, and making sure they knew that the one thing that did not fail that day was the courage of the men and women of this police department.
Well, I'm sure I speak for everybody up here in saying we agree with that. So thank you. Ms. Gibson, the Senate Rules and Homeland Security Joint Report recommended the board streamline its policies and procedures. In last Congress, you took steps to address this, including implementing an electronic approval process. I just want you to comment on what steps the board is taking to make sure the board is responsive to department requests and how that's going.
Thank you, Senators. The electronic approvals was a big one. Previously, requests from the department were hand-walked around to various members of the board for them to sign things. We can now sign things electronically, and I've seen instances where, within 5 minutes, every electronic signature is in. I would say also we do not need to wait for a formal board meeting to field a request from the department or to make a decision. And there have been any number of occasions when a member of the board has raised an issue that they thought needed immediate discussion, and we are able to convene a meeting either virtually or in person to ensure that is discussed. We are looking at other ways in which we might further expedite and streamline. I think some of the recommendations to remove some of the tactical decision-making from the board are good ones that would help to enhance our ability to really focus on strategic things.
Okay, thank you very much. My time.
Thank you. Representative Torres is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senator Amy Klobuchar, for for allowing us to come and join you today. Thank you for also working with me on the 911 Saves Act. As you know, 911 dispatchers, police dispatchers across the country deserve to be recognized as the first responders that they are. So thank you for being my partner in doing that. Thank you to our guests for being here today. Chief, thank you once again. Last week, the Oversight Subcommittee on House Administration held a hearing with the Capitol Police Inspector General. During that hearing, the Inspector General indicated that he had closed out recommendations based on reforms undertaken in, and I'm going to quote, in the spirit of those recommendations. Mr. McFarland, in general, is it common practice in government for IG recommendations to be closed based on agency compliance with the spirit of the recommendations?
Congresswoman Torres, as it relates to the compensating control, it's not uncommon that this has happened before, including the predecessor to the current IG, also did the same measures.
Are you made aware when those recommendations are made to be closed in the spirit? And do you typically agree with them, or is there some discussion that happens?
I think what the good news is, we were unaware at first when I first got here, of being here just 7 months. We were unaware that some things were being closed out. But once we found out that they were being closed out with these compensating controls, we immediately took action to actually remedy the situation by making sure that the board is now informed of, since May, I think it's May, that we will be notified of any of these controls come forward. I'm pleased to announce that nothing has come forward that way since, but yes, ma'am.
I'm going to give you an example why this is so important to me and why it gives me such heartburn when I read recommendation 20. On January 6th, I found myself as well as other colleagues stranded on the balcony, 45 minutes, face down, crawling from one side of the balcony to the other, without a place to really hide, with no, with basic security. We had one officer on our side. The one officer that was present near Gallery 1 or Gallery 3 did not have keys to a door that was wide open. So when the announcement was made to lock down the Capitol, that we were going to go and lock down and to lay on the ground and lay down quietly, that door remained wide open. Members of Congress were yelling, back and forth to the officer to close the door. And he informed us that he had no keys. So when I read the report analysis, that it says that, based on, common practice, there is a process to keep those doors or to have somebody secure those doors or have access to keys. What is that process? Because we certainly did not have that process on January 6th. And I never want to find myself or any other member of Congress or visitor in that predicament where we were trapped without a place to evacuate.
Congressman Torres, I will let you know that this predates me being here, but I can say that the chamber itself now is more secure than it has been previous to January 6th. So
that doesn't satisfy me, and I come back to me and tell me why this recommendation was closed and what the process is. And Chief, maybe you can come back and tell me how officers were trained to find whomever the keymaster is. I mean, at that time, and it's not your responsibility, but the AOC was conveniently, in another state, while the rest of us were trapped. I exceeded my time, so I'm going to yield back. Please come back to my office with a response.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Dr. Murphy is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for coming today. You're in the inimitable position of being here that you have to defend what was done before. Some of things are indefensible, but some of also the fact that you're going to say this is what the plan is moving forward. Pipe bombs. A couple pipe bombs were planted outside the Republican and Democrat Party national headquarters. The individual still remains at large, has eluded law enforcement, and FBI Director Christopher Wray says it's ongoing, but has not provided us any details. Chief Manger, I asked you about these pipe bombs in a previous meeting. Let me ask you this. Do you believe members of Congress were targets of the pipe bomb were placed at the party headquarters?
Well, I think that certainly political parties were a target. I mean, I think, and that I'm just speculating.
2 years ago.
Yeah, I'm just
2 years ago. Yeah. The rest of you guys, to the other members of this board, have you guys received any updates at all about the ongoing investigation?
No, sir.
Nothing. Not a word. Not a peep.
I understand it's an ongoing FBI investigation, but have no additional information.
When's the last time? Have y'all asked for an update?
We meet regularly with the FBI on a recurring basis. We can certainly ask about that the next time we meet.
Well, I mean, I would imagine just you're asking, and I mean, here we are 2 years with no update. Just seems a little bit odd with all the cameras and everything that are going around here that there's no update. You guys are responsible for protecting us, and I thank you for doing it and for volunteering a job that I would not want to do. I would love for you guys to commit to calling the FBI and asking for an update on their investigation. We need to know that they're actually doing their job.
I will, sir.
I need that commitment from you guys. I truly do, because we need to know, just in light of all the things that were happened and all the politics that occurred, we just need to know that you need to know that you are making sure that you're covering our backs. I have great faith in you guys compared to what was happening before, but I think we need to know that publicly. At the time, decisions made by the police board, again, everything in retrospect, you guys were not here. It was very troubling that the police board prevented House Republicans, but not House Democrats, from releasing January 6th footage. We didn't get that until after we've gotten to the majority. It reveals a horrible double standard, one of which we're seeing more and more, and Americans are concerned more and more about this country, about a double standard of justice that is occurring. You can't stick your head in the ground. It's happening. Americans are very concerned about that. And that decision makers at the time, especially, again, not in your purview, were perceived as having more political rather than threat-based considerations. And I go back and looking through, since we've been able to look and see, what about the National Guard? What about this? What about that? And according to a GAO report approved by both House and Senate leadership, we found that the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms wasted valuable time seeking approval from House and Senate leadership to bring in the National Guard. Can't have that happen again. This was politics, it was not security. And, you know, after January 6th, numerous security decisions were dictated politically by the Speaker of the House at that time to further a political agenda. So what I need from you all are guarantees that you are going to be an apolitical board, that decisions, regardless if it were the head of the Senate, regardless of the Speaker of the House, that if there is a security threat upon the members of Congress, that if you deem it to be a political one rather than an actuarial threat, you will at least alert the minority party at the time, I don't care who it is, about the political nature of the charge rather than the actuarial threat.
Dr. Murphy, I can assure you that I am committed to a nonpartisan approach in every security decision that I make, and I demand the same of all my staff.
Thank you. It was honestly an embarrassment on our nation because it was obviously done politically. What happened on January 6th is beyond comprehension. What happened was wrong, but there were obviously mitigating factors that could have occurred which did not occur for political reasons. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Bice is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the board for being with us this afternoon. I'm grateful for the work that you and your employees do to keep the Capitol complex safe for members, for staff, and certainly for visitors. However, following up on Mr. Griffin's line of questioning, I am concerned about the separation agreement with former acting Chief Pittman and how it was handled. It appears she was given the ability to go on leave without pay status with Capitol Police to attain the necessary 20 years of service required for federal retirement benefits, while simultaneously beginning a new lucrative job with UC Berkeley. And so I want to start with this. General Gibson, you stated earlier in your testimony that personnel issues for the United States Capitol Police were under the purview of the Chief of Police. However, Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a page from the Cap Police Board GAO report dated February 2017, which lists roles and responsibilities for the Capitol Police Board and the Chief of the U.S. Capitol Police. And under this, the human capital roles includes issuing waivers to mandatory retirement provisions for Capitol Police officers, as well as determining the leave system for Capitol Police personnel. And it does state, in fact, the board establishes the uniform policy. Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Chairman, my apologies. General Gibson, the Capitol Police Board is required by statute to implement a uniform policy, correct?
Yes, policy, but we do not get involved in the application of the policy to individuals within the department, unless it is a termination.
Do you believe that the policy for leave has been applied uniformly in this particular situation?
Yeah, so Ms. Bice, it would be difficult to say if it's applied uniformly without understanding how it's been applied across the board. And Ms. Pittman, or former Chief Pittman's separation is the only one I'm aware of like that, because again, this is not a matter that the board has been personally involved in.
Mr. McFarland, if I could ask you, do you believe that do you agree with the interpretation that the United States Capitol Police have the unilateral authority to place employees on leave without pay?
Policies, yes. The chief is responsible for administrating the policy, while the board and the oversight committees look at the regulations. So, yes.
Ms. Rexroth, I know that this is a little bit of a foreign topic for you, as you've only been acting for a short time, but.
Yes, it would be hard for me to answer that one without the full detail, and I don't have the full details, so I apologize.
So this is my concern. We mentioned at the beginning of this hearing that we've worked hard to improve processes and sort of, clarify issues, come together. But on this particular topic, I think there's disagreement. It's very clear that there's sort of this, we're not quite sure. We think the board can, but the board has the ability, the chief can unilaterally make these decisions. It doesn't seem like there's real clarity on whether or not this policy has been put in place uniformly across the board. And I have concerns about that. I want to also talk about the non-disclosure agreements, if I may, Chief. It's been widely reported that at least one former U.S. Capitol Police signed a non-disclosure agreement when he left, and additionally, former Officer Pittman also signed a separation agreement prohibiting her from sharing that information. This committee has actually asked for a copy of that agreement, and we have been given a summary, but actually not a copy of the agreement. The reason given was that Ms. Pittman was prohibited from doing so in the agreement. Would you be willing to offer this agreement to this committee to be able to review?
The summary has absolutely everything that's included in the agreement.
Would you be willing to give us a copy of the actual agreement that was signed by Ms. Pittman and yourself and legal counsel?
I'd have to go check with my general counsel before I answered that.
Okay. Mr. Chair, my time is almost expired, so at this time I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Ms. Lee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to focus on the subject of the Inspector General process. And as we know, the Inspector General reviews the processes and procedures of the Capitol Police from time to time, makes recommendations on areas where we might need to see improvement. And then, of course, we track, and you all, as a board, track implementation of that improvement. And I'd like to talk a little bit more detail about how that happens and the status of some of those improvements. Last week, we had Inspector General Ron Russo testify in front of our Oversight Subcommittee in the House Administration Committee. And he shared with us that some of the Inspector General's recommendations had been designated as closed, even though there had been some internal modification to what exactly was changed or improved or implemented. We have heard and have been tracking closely in this committee the progress of those changes, implementation of the Inspector General's recommendations, and of course, our shared interest in ensuring that we are equipping and implementing the best practices that we can identify for our Capitol Police. So Inspector General Russo stated that some of these recommendations may have been essentially marked and reported as completed because they were moving in the right direction and they met the spirit of the recommendation. In essence, the recommendation itself, the thing that needed to be fixed or was recommended to be fixed, had been altered in some way, but nonetheless marked as closed. And while we certainly appreciate the Capitol Police Inspector General bringing this to our attention, we want to be sure that we understand a little bit more about those modifications in that process. So, General Gibson, I'd like to start with you. Are you familiar with these Inspector General reports and the recommendations in them?
Yes, we are familiar with the IG's reports as he publishes them and the recommendations. I would say the IG's decision as to whether or not to close a recommendation and whether or not it's because it was fully met or a compensatory control has been applied is his decision, not the board's decision or the chief's decision.
Where a modification of any type is made, is that indicated, is that reported back to the board as something that was changed or modified?
So this is something that Mr. McFarland mentioned previously, where we have recently become aware that Mr. Russo, like his predecessor, has applied at times compensatory controls. And Mr. Russo has made a commitment to keep us informed when this occurs. We have quarterly updates at formal board meetings with the IG, and that's an ideal forum for us to discuss that and better understand his rationale, particularly in those places where he has applied some kind of compensatory control in his decision to close that.
Are you concerned, with his commitment to continue to keep you all informed in mind, are you concerned about the concept of compensatory controls and deviations from the actual recommendations that are made by the Inspector General?
So I think the concept of compensatory controls is not in itself disturbing. It is a practice that is applied by other IGs at times. I am not yet concerned about the compensatory controls that Mr. Russo may have applied in his decisions to close them, but certainly it's something that we'll want to continue to look at in our shared interest in that aspect of oversight.
And as part of your oversight role, will you all be making an assessment, an independent assessment essentially, of whether you think any modification, any compensatory control is still done in a way that truly does meet that objective, the objective of the recommendation in the first place?
So it's a hypothetical, but certainly our IG working group that is working closely to dig into the details of those reports, I would expect them to bring that to our attention should they find such an instance.
All right. And Chief Manger, anything that you would add on this subject and how you view this from an operational perspective?
So we very carefully document our actions, the IG's response to our actions, and it is logged in and it is available to this committee, to the board, and it gives specific detail about what actions we've taken. So I want to say for the record that we are not we're not changing the target. I mean, we are complying with the recommendation, and it's solely the IG's decision whether to close it or not.
Thank you.
It's all documented.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. Mr. Loudermilk's recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. General Gibson, I agree with something you said in your opening statement. I do think the board made a wise choice in selecting Chief Manger. I think he was an excellent choice and has done a lot to improve the security. Something else you said, though, was, yes, I agree that the Capitol is more secure than it was on January the 6th. The question is it as secure as it needs to be? And that's what my subcommittee is trying to get to identify the failures of January 6th, which unfortunately the select committee did not look at, and identify those to make sure that they're corrected so the general populace and the people that visit the Capitol can feel that, yes, it is as secure as it needs to be. I'm going to ask some questions about January 6th, understanding none of you were in your capacity or in your current job at that time, but as your capacity in your current position that you can answer those. There was a 2003 directive of the Metropolitan Police that prohibits their officers from being on Capitol Hill property without explicit approval from the Capitol Police Board. So, Ms. Gibson, in your position as chair of the board, I'm going to ask you this. Do you know, are there any pre-existing agreements between Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police that allow them on campus without prior board approval?
Well, there are memorandums of agreement between the department and the Metropolitan Police, and there are instances in which they can come without the approval of the board, and specifically the legislation, which I appreciate, from 2021 that allows the chief to declare an emergency and call for that kind of external support without having to convene the Capitol Police Board for decision and discussion.
Well, thank you. Do you know, were there any pre-existing agreements in place on or before January 6th that also allows that?
Mr. Loudermilk, I'll be honest, I am very focused on improving the security of the Capitol today and moving forward, and things that occurred well before my tenure are not things that I've been focused on. I'm afraid I don't have that answer.
Mr. McFarland, do you know if that was in existence on January 6th, any previous agreements?
Sorry, I do not know.
Chief Manger?
I don't know either.
Okay. If it's possible, if somebody could look, that's very important for us. General Gibson, do you know, has there ever been a time that undercover agents, either federal or local, operated on the U.S. Capitol complex without Capitol Police Board approval or in compliance with some other agreement?
I am not aware of that occurring in my tenure on the Capitol Police Board.
Okay, thank you. Chief Major, I'm not going to ask any questions about separations agreements, so I think that one's done for now. Who's Julie Farnham? Who is Julie Farnham?
She was a former employee who was the deputy director of our supervisor in our intelligence section.
Okay, so she's no longer working in the department. That's right.
Correct.
When she was here, was she working on a book while she was employed with the Capitol Police?
I know she's written a book. I don't know when if she wrote it while she was here or after she left.
When was her last day as a Capitol Police employee?
I can get back to you with that, but it's been a couple of months at least.
If you will, I appreciate that. Have you ever seen a copy or a draft of the manuscript?
I know that two of my staff have reviewed the book.
Okay. Mr. McFarland, have you ever seen a copy or a draft of that?
Yes, we have a copy for security review.
Okay. Same, Ms. Gibson?
Yes, my staff has also reviewed to make security redactions of sensitive security information.
And Ms. Rexroth?
I have not, but
You have not?
Yeah.
And I'm taking it that the review was for security sensitivity. General Gibson, who is Jennifer Hemingway?
Jennifer Hemingway is the Chief of Staff of the Senate Sergeant at Arms.
What was her role on January 7, 2021?
I believe at some point on that day, she probably became the acting Sergeant at Arms.
Yes, she was. Are you aware that on January 7th, as her role as acting Senate Sergeant at Arms, she called Ms. Pittman, Assistant Chief Pittman, and offered her the role as acting Chief of Police?
I have no knowledge of anything that happened on January 7th.
Have you ever discussed that with her?
No, I have not.
Do you know if the Capitol Police have any records of this communication?
No, I have no records of anything on January 7th.
Okay. Do you know if the Capitol Police has any records of the hiring of Ms. Pittman or Chief Manger?
Oh, I know we have copies of the hiring of Chief Manger. I was intimately involved in that action.
Okay. Fortunately, I see I'm out of time, and I yield back. I'll submit the rest of questions for the record.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. De-Esposito is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to start first. I am a proud retired New York City detective, so I'm going to start with the police stuff first and talk like a cop. Chief, I know that you mentioned in some of your remarks the most serious issue that we're facing is staffing. And obviously, throughout this country, staffing in law enforcement agencies is a problem, and it's a problem because cops are treated so poorly, whether it's by administrations, whether it's by the people that they serve, whether it's by so-called leaders and elected officials. So what are you doing to make sure that we are getting the best and the brightest here in the Capitol Police Force?
So our recruitment efforts through social media, and I think it's the way we, if for lack of a better term, the way we market this position. This, as you know, is a different kind of police department. It's a very unique police department. Our mission is unique around the country. And we are appealing to folks who want to serve their country, who want to work in federal law enforcement, that don't necessarily want to be transferred all over the country like most other federal law enforcement agencies. And these strategies have been very successful in terms of attracting good quality folks.
Okay. I'm going to talk fast like a true New Yorker, so to try to get through this. You also mentioned in your remarks leap pay, and you specifically mentioned leap pay to DPD. Now, why wouldn't we include all members of service in the leap pay? I mean, just speaking as a cop and not as a member of Congress, I think that if we're going to implement programs like that for members of service and some not others, I think the morale would be destroyed in the department.
So we're just trying to mirror what the other 1811 series special agents have, and we're just trying to mirror that for our folks.
Okay.
And we can certainly discuss expanding it.
Okay. At the Inspector General oversight hearing last week, Capitol Police Inspector General stated that he supported the United States Capitol Police implementing specific whistleblower protections. Ms. Rexroth, do you agree that the United States Capitol Police should implement specific whistleblower protections?
I'm not sure about the Capitol Police, sir, but I know that for whistleblower protection, just in general, I would be an advocate of that.
Okay, Mr. McFarland, do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Ms. Gibson, do you agree?
Absolutely. Whistleblowers must be protected and cannot be retaliated against.
Chief, since you appeared before our committee months ago, have you implemented specific whistleblower protections?
There are regulations that prohibit discrimination and harassment of employees and that I think can be used to ensure the protection of whistleblowers.
Okay, so will you commit to expand on them by the end of the year? It's one of the most serious issues that we're talking about as a committee. I think that what's already in place needs to be expanded.
Whistleblowers should be protected. True whistleblowers should be protected.
Will you commit to work with us by the end of the year to expand?
I can certainly work with the committees on it, absolutely.
Ms. Gibson, why hasn't the Capitol Police Board directed the United States Capitol Police to implement specific whistleblower protections?
The Capitol, I absolutely support whistleblower protections. It's essential to ensuring there's an environment in which an employee who might discover waste, fraud, and abuse would feel free and safe and secure in bringing that to someone's attention. Certainly the board can, I think perhaps the best avenue might be to ask the IG to look at the whistleblower protection program and assess its adequacy.
Okay. I look forward to working with the chairman and ranking member to get some answers on that. Ms. Gibson, I also want to thank you for providing the Committee on House Administration with a copy of the Board Manual of Procedures. Is it correct that this manual was not made available to oversight entities until your arrival as the Senate Sergeant at Arms?
I believe that is correct, but I don't know for sure what happened before I got here.
It seems important that the men and women, the rank and file of the United States Capitol Police have access to these regulations as well. When will you make a copy of the relevant sections of the manual available to all personnel in the Capitol Police?
So that's certainly an important consideration, and what I'd like to do is consult with my colleagues and our oversight entities to develop a more fulsome response.
And I know I only have a few seconds left, but back in the NYPD, we have something that's called a patrol guide. So, Chief Manger, does the United States Capitol Police have a policy in place in their guide that governs the use of social media applications, or I should say communication applications like WhatsApp, Signal, or other messaging apps?
We have a social media policy.
Okay, and are messaging apps involved in there?
I know that they're mentioned. I can't tell you more specific.
Do you know that these, or are you aware that these applications are currently in use by the United States Capitol Police?
It would not surprise me.
Okay. Have you ever used WhatsApp in your official capacity?
I have not.
Okay. And just, I guess my time has expired, I yield back.
Next up, Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to each of you for being here. Thank you for the service each of you provides. I want to take a minute in particular, Chief, to thank the men and women of the Capitol Police. In Texas and all across the country, I view a big part of my job as supporting the men and women of law enforcement, and I'm grateful for the courage of the men and women of Capitol Police and police officers all across our nation who risk their lives to keep Americans safe. I want to ask you, Chief, first of all, about your assessment of the current morale in the Capitol Police and the state of readiness of the Capitol Police to protect against the threats we're facing.
So I think morale is always in the eye of the beholder. I think it has improved since January 6th. We are still at a point, staffing-wise, where we're holding people over, we're canceling days off, and this has a big impact on morale. So we still have a ways to go, but I think that the cops understand that things are better than they were, and they are improving. I assure you that our state of readiness is good. There's still work to be done, but I have great confidence in the men and women of this department that they have the training, the courage, the equipment, and we, as in leadership, have good plans in place to ensure the safety of this campus.
Well, I'll tell you one concern that I have, and it's a growing concern, which is the rise of threats that are directed against lawmakers and lawmakers of both parties. We have seen an explosion of threats of violence against members of both parties. According to CBS News, Capitol Police investigated 7,500 cases of potential threats against lawmakers in 2022 alone. That is nearly double what the number of threats were in 2017. We have also seen multiple instances, whether it was the horrific shooting at the congressional baseball game where you had a deranged lunatic who came with the explicit objective of murdering Republican members of Congress. And it is only because of Steve Scalise, Capitol Police detail that happened to be there that deranged lunatic was stopped and killed. Had Congressman Scalise been late that morning, had he decided to take his kids to school that morning instead of going to the congressional baseball practice, there was no one else there that had a detail. And had Steve Scalise not been there that morning, the outcome of that morning likely would have been 2 dead senators and a dozen or more dead House members shot defenselessly in a bullpen in Northern Virginia. We have seen instances escalating from there, including we had a member of Congress attacked in the elevator of her apartment building. We had tragically a Senate staffer repeatedly stabbed in broad daylight here in Washington, D.C., just a couple of blocks from this hearing room. I am very concerned with this rising level of threats, and I fear we're going to wake up one day and somebody's going to be killed. On either side of the aisle, the number of lunatics who are seeking to do harm is growing. And so I want to ask you, what is your view of what needs to be done to prevent that, to ensure that we can protect the safety of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle in both houses from the growing and serious threats of violence and specific violence targeting individual members?
So the first step is for our Intelligence Bureau, which has been greatly expanded, to continue to be proactive in scrubbing social media to try and locate these threats. And so many of these threats, and you know this, Senator, we actually get them from the staffs of the members. But we also are able to pick some of these up early so that we can mitigate them as quickly as possible. In my budget, I've requested additional investigative agents because of the caseload. 500 cases per year per investigator, which is just unmanageable, and we need to do better than that. We also are working with state and local police departments all around the country to assist us in ensuring protection for members at events when they're in their home districts. But we've got to continue to, I know we're short on time. We need to do a better job at protecting members when they're home, their families.
Obviously, we have the tragic attack of Nancy Pelosi's husband at home, and all of our families are at risk.
And we had a congressman whose staff was attacked by a baseball bat wielding man just a couple months ago. So we've got to make sure that we've got security measures in place in home district offices, in homes, so that it raises everybody's level of security.
Well, I'm working in a bipartisan way with Chairman Klobuchar, who is very concerned about this issue as well, and we're working on a Member Protection Act that would help enhance resources available to keep members and our families safe. And I hope with each of you here that you will work with us to try to address this problem so that we can address it proactively on the front end rather than being confronted with tragedy on the back end.
We're committed to do that, sir.
Thank you.
What purposes, gentlemen? Any recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to submit for the record a bulletin from the Capitol Police Board dated January 8th, 2021, appointing Ms. Yogananda Pittman as acting chief of police, signed by Ms. Jennifer Hemingway, acting chairman of the police board, Paul Irving, member of the police board, and Brent Branton, member of the Capitol Police Board.
Without objection.
I also request unanimous consent to submit for the record the testimony of Paul Irving dated February 23, 2021 to the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, where he testified that he resigned his position effective January 7th. He resigned as House Sergeant at Arms effective January 7th, 2021, a day before he signed the appointment of Ms. Yogananda Pittman.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
What purposes, ranking member? Secret recognition.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the following transcribed interview transcripts from the January 6th House Select Committee. 2 transcripts of former House Sergeant at Arms and Commanding General of the D.C. National Guard, General William Walker's interviews with the Select Committee, dated December 13th, 2021 and April 21st, 2022, respectively. Transcript of Acting Assistant Chief of the Capitol Police, Sean Gallagher's interview with the Select Committee, dated 11 January 2022. A transcript of former Acting Police Chief Pittman's interview with the Select Committee, dated January 13th, 2022. Transcript of former House Sergeant at Arms Paul Irving's interview with the Select Committee, dated March 4th, 2022. A transcript of former Police Chief Steve Sutton's interview with the Select Committee, dated April 20, 2022. I also ask unanimous consent to enter the record Appendix 2 of the final report of the January 6th House Select Committee, entitled D.C. National Guard Preparation for and Response to January 6th, and I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the following news articles. An article from the Associated Press dated July 23rd, 2021, entitled Pelosi Did Not Block the National Guard from the Capitol on January 6th. An article from the Washington Post dated July 28, 2021, entitled The False GOP Claim That Pelosi Turned Down the National Guard Before January 6th Attack. An article from the New York Times dated July 27, 2021, entitled Republicans Are Blaming Nancy Pelosi for the January 6th Attack. Their claims don't add up. Finally, an article from CNN dated July 21st, 2021, entitled Fact-Checking Representative Jordan's Claim That Speaker Pelosi Was Responsible for U.S. Capitol Security on January 6th.
Without objection. As we wrap up, I just want to say thank you to our witnesses. Thank you for what you do to keep the Capitol safe, the visitors of the Capitol safe, and those that work here safe. It is not an easy task, and thank you for those that you work with, in particular the men and women of the Capitol Police, who every day wake up with the badge over their heart and walk out the door knowing they're going to answer the call to protect this institution, to protect our visitors and those that work here. And we thank them for their service. We thank you all for being here in a bicameral, bipartisan conversation about protecting this institution.
All right, well, thank you very much, Chairman Stile, and to also Senator Fisher, and of course, Ranking Member Morelli. This has been a thorough hearing and pretty good for the first one since 1945. That was a little intimidating on its own. And I want to thank our witnesses. I want to thank all of you of the work you do to adapt and modernize to address our current and future challenges. I want to thank you, Chief Major, for all you've done in recruiting and retaining officers and responding to so many members' concerns on a daily basis, and always, as far as I can see, keeping your cool. The hearing record will remain open for 1 week. Again, we all thank our Capitol Police, and this has been a productive hearing. Thank you. We're adjourned.